Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics in this video, and with Parliament now in its summer recess, I'd like to discuss what the new Prime Minister Boris Johnson is likely to be doing over the next 6 weeks before coming back to face MPs. But first, if you find yourself enjoying the video, then please consider clicking the like button and subscribing to the channel. So Boris Johnson has something of a quandary now as Prime Minister. He promised that we would definitely leave the EU on October 31st and has packed out the most senior positions in government with Eurosceptics, most of whom are very gung-ho about leaving without a deal at all. His problem is that Parliament is dead set against us leaving without a deal, which means they are dead set against us leaving any time this year. So one of the main things Johnson needs to do is drum up public support for his insanely dangerous plans to sink our island beneath the waves. To this end, he's going on a charm offensive across the country. He's already visited the northern city of Manchester to discuss his commitment to high-speed rail across the Pennines and has plans to visit areas outside of the normal southeast bubble in order to try and emphasise support for the wider union. So he's going to be going to Scotland quite soon as well as part of that. Unlike Theresa May, Boris Johnson is not afraid of people and so is likely to be making a number of aspirational speeches about great things he wants to do all over the country, with the media presumably keeping quiet about all the broken promises he made during his time as Mayor of London. He'll also be wanting to discuss ways of getting a deal through before leaving the EU. However, as much as this might be the genuine intention of Johnson, it is a non-starter. Michael Gove has even said that no deal is assumed by the government. The EU has been very clear that the backstop is not going anywhere. All of this talk of alternative arrangements is just noise to fool the electorate. The second the UK actually implements alternative arrangements, the backstop disappears anyway. As much as I don't expect the Prime Minister to be dashing around Europe a lot, I'm sure there will be telephone conversations, and he has been invited to visit both France and Germany. In addition, there is a meeting of the G7 in late August, which he will be attending. He can certainly have private conversations with Macron and Merkel there. Perhaps he'll have worked out what he actually wants by then as well. He will, of course, also be visiting Dublin to at least pretend he cares about Ireland, though I wouldn't put in much hope of him demonstrating any understanding of the reality, as violence has once again reared its ugly head there with an attack on the police for the first time since the Northern Ireland Police Force was reformed. But I think he probably knows that the issue is not the EU, but the UK Parliament in obtaining a deal. This is presumably why Michael Gove has said that the government is working on that assumption that it is going to be a no-deal Brexit. And that is, of course, because it's impossible to get the hardliners in his party to accept any realistic deal. And given that he's even less interested in working with opposition parties than Theresa May was, he will certainly not countenance any concessions to get those on board, especially if it enrages those in his own party. So even if they accept how damaging a no-deal Brexit will be for the country, not for them, of course, they will absolutely go ahead with it. This ultimately stems from the belief that the Conservative Party is doomed if they don't leave the EU this October. It's not a foolish assumption on their part either. They have been absolutely killed in the local and European elections recently. They were dying a death in the polls, but as soon as Johnson took over with his bellicose rhetoric, the Conservatives have surged ahead in the polls again. They are winning their traditional support base back over. But that is because much of the electorate don't really understand political realities and are of the belief that he's definitely going to take us out this October. In fact, it could be argued that if there were a general election now, the Conservatives might do all right. I don't believe they would gain a majority, and there's still a real risk that the Brexit Party would split their vote enough to end up in opposition. So there's no way Johnson would risk an election before we've left, or at least not before October. But if we have a general election after October this year, without having left, then Johnson exposes himself as either being unwilling or unable to take us out of the EU, then that momentum would easily shift back to the Brexit Party. So he can't allow that either. The main area where my judgment of a politician differs greatly from, I would say, the general electorate, is that lots of people support or oppose a politician based on what they say they will do, or perhaps on what their newspaper says they will do. I base it on what I think they actually will do. Boris Johnson says he'll take us out of the EU this October. Now, don't get me wrong, there is a serious danger, but Parliament is not only wholly opposed to this, but it has the power to stop him. So even if I were reckless enough to approve of his policy, there's no way I could judge Johnson as someone who can possibly bring it about. I would also expect some genuine no-deal planning. Theresa May's government were frequently telling us how much was being spent on no deal planning and kept telling us about all these schemes. But there was never any evidence of plans that would actually alleviate the catastrophe of a no deal exit. And that was simply because she never believed it would happen. There was never any intention of a no deal exit while she was Prime Minister. Why would she do that? It's absolute madness. The EU, for example, have been doing genuine no deal planning because it's not up to them. They know that Britain could just leave and they need to be prepared. From our point of view, we knew that it was our decision and our government said, well, we're not going to be stupid enough to do that. They were only saying so as some sort of poor bargaining chip. But it is believed that Johnson is pushing for this. So the planning, I would expect, will suddenly become real. Of course, it will be too little too late. There isn't enough time and probably not enough competence either. But there'll almost certainly be something to try and ease the situation across the borders. Probably not in Ireland. I wouldn't expect anything there. But I would expect some real no deal planning to be carried out now. But mostly this summer, I would imagine it's about him pushing his populist agenda. It will be about doing everything he can to get the public on his side and nullify the opposition. For Johnson, becoming Prime Minister just before Parliament disappeared off for summer is a godsend. It means he has weeks of pushing his own agenda with no scrutiny from Parliament, and don't expect the popular media or the BBC to call him out very often or indeed very loudly. Labour will no doubt be exposing Johnson's past failings in the office of mayor and his ultra-elite cabinet. So in return, Johnson will be preparing a budget with lots of extra spending on public services such as the NHS, schools and social care. Oh, it'll be a very generous budget. Of course, along with his tax cutting regime as well. The numbers can't possibly balance there. But for him, the beauty is that he doesn't even need to spend the money. He can promise loads of extra money to the NHS, doesn't need to cough it up. He can do the same with schools, same with social care, same with anything. He doesn't actually need to make that money appear. And the reason for that is he just needs to put forward the budget, because if there's a general election, he needs to get people to think, oh, he's going to give us all this stuff. And that general election, if it happens, is going to be this year. But that'd be far too early for the budget to come into effect. So by the time that budget would come into effect, the general election would have come and gone. If things go his way, that means he would have won that general election. He can then produce another budget, which all of a sudden makes that money that he promised disappear. And the really awful thing is that people will probably fall for it. Again. So I hope you found the video interesting. If you'd like to support the channel further, then please click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.